I always love to start the show with the 5 things that you need to know to start your day. And let's start this day with the stimulus and the government shutdown. We've got some major news on the government shutdown front that I want to get to first, and then we will talk about the stimulus. So lawmakers right now, this afternoon, could be unveiling a compromised bipartisan spending bill to avert a government shutdown. Imagine that. They're able to come together and get something done. That is shocking. They're able to come together and get something done on the stimulus, on the government shutdown front. So here's what it would look like. They're not talking about the stimulus. We'll get to that in a second. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin came together earlier this month to pass that short-term spending bill, which would expire on October 1st. Now they need to finish up these discussions today in order to try to get this spending bill through the end of the year, or at least through the duration into 2021, January, February, etc. They don't want these talks to end in a derail over its end date, so they said they could be flexible on that ending date. They don't want that to be the thing that throws everything off. The bill is expected to be introduced in the House of Representatives today, but it will have bipartisan agreements from both sides, and it would likely then pass the Senate. See, it's amazing. When they want to come to some sort of agreement on something, they can, and they can do it pretty quickly. And still, we're miles apart on this stimulus. Larry Kudlow, the director of President's Economic Council, said also that he would be open to an additional aid package for the stimulus. So here's Larry Kudlow. I just want you to hear Larry Kudlow talking about this. He was at the Economic Club of New York yesterday, where he said, I would say that it's in the range of plausibility that we would get to a $1.5 trillion package, he said yesterday during this interview. But he then went on the news, and he just sounds like, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe you can come up with the word. The word I'm thinking is like condescending. He's a Wall Street guy, right? He was an anchor on CNBC covering Wall Street and all those guys. He cares about Wall Street. He cares about big business. Okay, that's his world. And when he's talking yesterday with a camera in his face, he sounds like condescending. Like, that group of people over there that's hurting, that group. Yeah, maybe we'll figure something out. Even Grover can't stand it. Listen to Larry Kudlow yesterday on this stimulus plan and where things stand right now. If I can find that little sound bite, I will bring it to you. Oh, here it is. No, there it is. Here it is. Thank you, Grover.
The president's proposed a major payroll tax deferral, which is very important. That's not only an incentive for people who've been working through this pandemic, 147 million some odd people, but also an incentive to go back to work, to get essentially, an 11% pay raise. That's an after-tax wage increase, which is great stuff. And we think we're going to protect them in this fashion. We'll see how the stimulus talks go. We'd like to renew the business loans, the small business loans. I think there's a lot of talk about that. Some money for school openings. I think that's very, very important. And the main thing right now is not only is the virus numbers coming down, but the economy is producing tremendous numbers across the board. It's a self-sustaining V-shaped recovery.
Really? It's a self-sustaining recovery. It's a V-shaped recovery. That's like the biggest pile of garbage I've heard in a while. And I've got a lot of garbage in today's show, but that's a big one. It's a V-shaped recovery for who? This thing, if you watch my show any length of time, you know that I think that this thing is a K-shaped recovery because the data says it is. You know how I feel on this show. I don't throw a lot of my emotion without fact on this show. The data shows us that Wall Street is doing fine, that businesses are fine, that the American people are not fine, low-income families are not fine, there's permanent job loss in this country, that's not fine. I just like the condescension in his voice, like when he says, that group of people, whatever you call them, like, listen to this again. I just can't take this.
It's very important. That's not only an incentive for people who've been working through this pandemic, 147 million some odd people. But
Yeah, some 100 million odd people, just 100 million, that group. Those schlebs that work for other people. What about all the people that haven't gotten jobs? What about all the people with a permanent job loss in this country? And he's not talking about that. And he's like, this economy is great. I'm talking all my Wall Street buddies. It's fantastic. V-shaped recovery, my butt. This thing is a K-shaped recovery, and all the data shows us. In fact, I'll be showing you a story a little bit later in the show as we deep dive the housing crisis today and what that data looks like. Tell that to the person who's about to lose their home, that this is a V-shaped recovery and we're bouncing back, baby. We're doing great. Aren't we, Grover?
Come on, man.
Exactly, Joe. Come on, man. Really? Nevertheless, there are some positive signs on the part of Democrats, because now they sort of get to sit back and watch as President Trump has opened up the door and put the pressure on Republicans now to pass a stimulus plan. And Grover is fired up today and totally agrees with this. But here are what Republicans are saying to President Trump now. Now, President Trump the other day, if you paid any attention to this during his press conference, said that he would support a bill in the range of what the Problem Solvers Caucus supported, which was that $1.5 trillion plan. That framework that both Republicans and Democrats, 50 of them, 50 members of that Problem Solvers Caucus came together and passed this new framework. Republicans have said in the Senate there's no way that this is going to fly. Democrats said, well, yeah, we're not really supportive of it terribly much. Nancy Pelosi kind of poured cold water on it because it's not as large as they would like it to be. But President Trump may have opened up the door for these negotiations during his press conference when he said that he would support this and that he wants a higher number than what Republicans want in the Senate. And that was a shot across the bow. Well, that did not sit well with some Republicans. Republicans in the Senate who are running for re-election right now don't like to be chastised by the President of the United States, certainly during an election year. Well, that's exactly what happened. Chuck Grassley was not happy about it. This is Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, who warned the president. I mean, he basically flat out warned him and said, he better be careful.
What are the chances of getting fiscal stimulus before the election? From 1 to 100, what do you put it at?
0, unless Pelosi decides she needs something. She's going to have to sit down with the White House, but the White House has been making some statements here recently that would never get hardly any Republicans in the House, in the United States Senate. So this used to be the White House versus Pelosi up until about now. Now the president's coming in and saying we can maybe go to $1.5 trillion. He better be careful of that, because I don't think that bill could get through the United States Senate.
Come on, man.
He better be careful. I don't think that bill's getting through the United States Senate. And he's right. I don't see a snowball's chance in hell that it's going to pass the Senate. With Republicans, I mean, you have Senator John Thune. Some of you yesterday asked me, said, could we get a list of the 20 or so Republicans that would not vote for it? I mean, they have not come on. We don't know yet because there hasn't been a vote, so we don't have them on the record as to who exactly they are. But we have a pretty good idea of a good handful of them. Chuck Grassley being one of them. Ted Cruz being another. Senator John Thune, yet another. Lindsey Graham being another. So there's a good Rand Paul. There's another one that won't vote for any kind of a stimulus plan in the Senate. That's more than that $650 billion. There's no appetite for it. They do not want to spend this much money. They don't want to spend this money to help people. They're more concerned with helping Wall Street. Again, this big corporate Wall Street package that passed a few months ago, the CARES Act, was a boondoggle. Billions of dollars went to companies that didn't need it. It was a big windfall for all those friends of Washington, D.C. politicians. That's all it was. But we did have good stimulus checks in there that actually kept people out of poverty. And now that all of that's dried up, here we go, folks. Buckle your seatbelts, because it's coming. Meanwhile, members of the House are not happy with Nancy Pelosi on this. Here's the front page of the Politico this morning. Pelosi faces growing Democratic unrest over COVID relief. So what's happening here is that some of her Democratic members they got on a fiery phone call the other day after this bill, this framework rolled out. Basically, they're calling on her to pass a narrower deal. The proposal, she has this pushback. There's a number of people that said, look, we've got to pass something. I'm going to go back to my district on October 9th when we have this recess, and I'm going to be going into town hall meetings. I'm going to be going to Rotary Club meetings. I'm going to be campaigning for re-election. And when my constituents say, hey, why haven't you passed any kind of legislation? I'm not going to have anything to point to. I won't have anything to point to. And the response basically from House leadership is, yes, tell them that you passed the HEROES Act back in May, and Republicans are sitting on it. Which is true, but that was 3 months ago. It's one of those things like, that's great, but what have you done for me lately? That's exactly what this is. And, I don't know how that's going to sit when some of these House Democrats go back for their break and start campaigning again. What will they say? And what will voters say to them? It'll be interesting to see. Nancy Pelosi, for her part, I think she's playing this political game right now, and I think she's probably right in the politics of this. I think that what she's doing is she's banking on the fact that most voters will blame President Trump for this lack of stimulus, lack of leadership on this, and I think she's probably right because he has shown a lack of leadership all summer long, and American people know that. He could have, now he's getting up at the podium the other day and only answering a reporter's question. He didn't even bring it up as part of his press conference. It was because John Roberts from Fox News asked him the question about COVID relief that he said, yeah, I would support that. If he really cared and he really wanted to get something done, the president would be out there at the podium every day saying, let's get this done, let's get this done. No one's taking a vacation, we're going to get this done. He has not done that. He's deferred to Mitch McConnell, who pressed a pause on this entire process. So I think Nancy Pelosi is probably accurate in this. She's playing a dangerous game, though. She's banking on the fact that most voters will think that President Trump failed in his leadership to pass an additional stimulus package. But let me know in the chat what you think. Do you think that, who's to blame here on this? Is it Republicans, Democrats, both? Who's sitting on this bill right now? Who doesn't want to put money on the table? I know exactly who I point the finger at in the Senate. Let me know in the chat what you think. And don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Today is our members only chat day, and you can become a channel member very simply just by going to morninginvest.com/join. We do this every Friday where we have a members only chat. It's my way of saying thank you to all of you who support the channel and support independent journalism. So thank you for that. All right. The other big stories that we're covering for you today, among our 5 big stories, the post office. Let's talk about the post office this morning because a federal judge just told Louis DeJoy, hey, Pat, Postmaster General, why don't you go fix what you broke, buddy? A judge has blocked the Postal Service from implementing those changes that were slowing down the mail. And certainly in the run-up to the November election, mail-in ballots, all of those things, the judge called these changes, quote, a politically motivated attack on the efficiency of the Postal Service, end quote. Now, this applies to 14 states that were suing the Trump administration for these changes, such as the removal of these sorting machines and those drop-off boxes. This is a preliminary injunction to stop that from happening. So at least it's stopping it. Now, basically, it's like you got to go back and, redo this. Meanwhile, there's internal records that were released from the post office yesterday showing that the U.S. Treasury Department tried to seize operational control over the Postal Service in exchange for a $10 billion loan. So that that the Treasury Department would take over the Postal Service. We'll give you $10 billion for you to stay afloat, but we're going to take over control. What? So that the post office would be under Steven Mnuchin's control. Can you imagine? Documents point to Mnuchin's directive that they wanted control of the mail service. The demand ceased, though, after the U.S. Postal Service hired a law firm that advised them that, hey, that's illegal. You can't do that. You can't be bought up by another government agency, basically. I mean, what? This is your administration right now. The third thing that I think you need to know about today is Biden's big town hall event last night on CNN. Now, there's some interesting moments. I think once, this was favorable ground for Joe Biden. He was not going to get any hardball questions last night from his lover, CNN. They're going to kiss him straight up and down, of course, so you're not going to get the types of questions that you would get from if President Trump were hosting this town hall meeting and CNN were asking the questions, of course. It's almost like Trump being on a Fox News one. Although that's not going to happen with Chris Wallace during this debate. Chris Wallace does not pull any punches. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But nevertheless, he got some, it was really nice kid glove treatment last night up there in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But there were a couple standout moments to me. One really outrageous moment to me. I'm going to start with that. Actually, I'm going to start with what he said about William Barr. So if you're not familiar with what Attorney General Bill Barr said yesterday, I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. He compared the lockdowns being, kept at home to slavery. Yes, to being kept in your house is akin to slavery. Sure. Okay. Listen to Bill Barr, and then I want you to listen to Jim Clyburn, who fired back at those thoughts. Listen.
Putting a national lockdown, stay-at-home orders is like house arrest. It's other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, this is the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history.
That statement by Mr. Barr was the most ridiculous, tone-deaf, god-awful things I've ever heard. It is incredible. The chief law enforcement officer in this country would equate human bondage to expert advice to save lives. Slavery was not about saving lives. It was about devaluing lives. This pandemic is a threat to human life.
A threat to human life. Comparing this to slavery. Let me know in the chat what you think about it. Well, Joe Biden at the town hall meeting last night addressed this softball of a question from Anderson Cooper. I mean, I think he had to bring it up, but what did he think of it is not exactly a tough question, and it gave him quite an opening to attack the administration and Bill Barr. Listen.
The comments by the Attorney General contribute to people, encourage people not to wear masks.
Sure, quite frankly, they're sick. Think about it. Did you ever think, any of you, you'd hear Attorney General say that following the recommendations of the scientific community to save your and other people's lives is equivalent to slavery? People being put in chains. You lost your freedom because you didn't act. The freedom to go to that ball game, the freedom of your kid to go to school, the freedom to see your mom or dad in the hospital, the freedom just to walk around your neighborhood because of failure to act responsibly. Anderson, I've been doing this a long time. I never, ever thought I would see such a thoroughly, totally irresponsible administration.
That was a fiery moment last night. Another really interesting moment, though, took place, and I don't know that you're going to hear this in the mainstream media much. You're not going to hear this on MSNBC. I don't know that you'll hear it much on CNN, even though it was their town hall. Good luck even seeing. In fact, let me just check in on this. I want to do this because I think it's important for you to understand what we deal with here in the mainstream media. Let me check here. This is, let's go to the front page of CNN to see if we see this story here and see if it's on the front page of CNN.com anywhere. Let's see here. I don't see anything. Oh, let's see here. Okay, we do have coverage of this town hall. Okay, let's click on this. That's a front page story, but let's see if one of their 5 takeaways is mentioned in this story on CNN. Let's see. I just want to scan this down here.
The messaging on the coronavirus from the White House has been all over the place since February.
Nope.
It's been extremely inconsistent.
Shocking. So this is not on the front page of CNN. Now, okay, in their 5 key takeaways from Biden's town hall last night, one of my big headlines, one of my big takeaways is not even mentioned on CNN's website, not even mentioned in their 5 takeaways article. This is why you can't trust mainstream media, folks. So one of my big takeaways was this exchange last night that Anderson Cooper did a follow-up, and I'm glad he admitted this. I'm glad he asked this follow-up question on fracking. Listen.
Let me just follow up on that. You said you won't ban fracking, but that you wanted to gradually move away from it ultimately. It sounds like to some you're trying to have it both ways. That I mean, politically, it's understandable why you might say that, but if fracking contributes to climate change, and climate change is an existential threat, why should fracking continue at all?
Well, fracking has to continue because we need a transition. We're going to get to net zero emissions by 2050, and we'll get to net zero power emissions by 2035. But there's no rationale to eliminate right now fracking.
There's no rationale right now to eliminate fracking. There's no rationale? Okay, just look at the front page of the National Geographic. Fracking boom, and all the science is in on this, folks. I mean, not only the areas that have to deal with earthquakes as a result of what they're doing underground, but also the tied to methane gas spikes in the Earth's atmosphere. And this, pointed to the shale gas operations as the culprit and our reliance on fossil fuel. Now, the reason that this is outrageous is because just a few weeks ago, Joe Biden is on record as saying that he wanted to eliminate fracking. Of course, President Trump went right after him and said, that's how you're going to lose Pennsylvania. That's how you're going to lose Pennsylvania. So I think he's up there in Pennsylvania country. He's up there in Scranton. And he's worried what that's going to look like to these people with fracking jobs and coal jobs. Instead of talking about what green energy jobs would mean for that sector, instead of saying, hey, by the way, green energy jobs pay about 18 to 20% more in wages, and there's more of them, and it's better for the environment, tremendously better for the environment. Instead of saying that, no, he backtracked. And if you look at the Democrats' record right now on climate, you compare this to what the Green Party is doing or others, they're not even talking about it. They do not support. I mean, the fact that they're not rolling back, they don't want to talk about fracking. The fact that they're scared to mention it, and to basically say, okay, I'm going to roll over here, and I'm not going to, I'm going to support fracking. I'm going to go back on what I said, so I can get the nomination, attracting those green votes, those Bernie voters. And now that we're right in the general election, pivoting back to being a centrist again. Here we go, all over again. These corporate, that's what these guys do. I want to play, this is what Howie Hawkins had to say. He tweeted this. Let me put this up here. This morning, of course, Howie Hawkins, the Green Party presidential candidate, was watching this debate last night. He had this to say on Twitter. He said, when Biden says fracking has to continue because we need a transition, what he really means to say is we are committed to locking the country into extended use of fossil fuel infrastructure for decades to come. And then, of course, they put up this, the difference here between these parties. They're all the same. I mean, when you think, and that's why Wall Street is fine right now with this. That's why Wall Street is totally fine with Biden or Trump, because nothing's really going to change. Wall Street will be just fine. No universal health care, no climate action, no legalizing marijuana, no standard living wage, no student debt relief, more fossil fuels. I mean, all of it's the same. So I was outraged about that, but just stunning again to go back to CNN's website.
Destroy our cities.
Nothing here. Oh, stark contrast with Trump. I don't trust President Trump on vaccines. Yeah, that's it. Those are the 5 takeaways from CNN's town hall that they mentioned. But no major party reversal on fracking. That didn't make it into CNN's article because your corporate overlords didn't want you to put that in there and didn't want you to call attention to it because they don't want you to. If you're on the fringe right now and you are a Bernie supporter and you're like thinking, oh, maybe I'll vote for Biden because there's nobody else right now. That's what they're trying to do, keep you from knowing that there are other voices out there. Look, I mean, Trump's a fascist. We all know that. But both of these parties, I mean, this is a two-party system that's just ruining this country right now. And all you need to see is how it doesn't matter who wins, because we're going to continue to increase military spending. We're going to continue to fight in these foreign wars. We're going to continue to doing the same crap that we've been doing for year after year after year. Because it all stays the same. It all stays the same. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a moment. The fourth thing that I think you need to know about today is the mainstream media's hypocrisy. Now, I just showed you one of them, CNN, last night in their town hall, not even mentioning the fracking story from Joe Biden. No mention of it. No mention of it in their 5 key takeaways from the town hall last night. This was one of the top stories. No. So Rachel Maddow did a story last night about immigration. And what she points to as one of the key failures of the Trump administration, putting these poor children in cages and locking them up, separating them from their families, which I think I hope many of you who watch this show would agree with me that that is horrible. Absolutely horrible to treat human beings like that. I'm going to play this clip and then I'm going to contextualize it for you. So watch Rachel Maddow from last night. And then I'm going to show you why this is one of the more hypocritical things I've seen from MSNBC in a while. Take a look.
The Trump administration, no matter what else they do, they will never, ever get out from the shadow of the fact that they really did, as a policy and a deliberate practice, they really did take little kids away from their moms and dads. It will never not be true that we all lived in a time when the White House ordered the forcible, systematic removal of children from their parents at the border. They outfitted the kids with little Mylar blankets and a lump of padding that was supposed to qualify as a mattress, and they told them to sleep on the floor behind chain link fence, alone in federal detention without their moms and dads. Thousands of kids taken from their parents by the U.S. government, with the U.S. government having no plan in place on how or when to get those kids back to their parents. When we realized that our government was doing this, when we realized that the Trump administration had ordered this, there was a deafening roar of public outcry. And the Trump administration eventually stopped the child separation policy. Well, at least they said they stopped it. Since the Trump administration announced that supposed end to the child separation policy, more than 1,000 more kids have been taken away from their parents at the southern border and put into U.S. government custody, separate and apart from their parents. Child separations are still happening. They're just happening in the shadows now, without the administration admitting that this is still their policy. It was not the first Trump administration scandal. It was permanent damage to humans. They did, as a policy and a deliberate practice, they really did take little kids away from their moms.
So these images look horrible, right? I mean, these are horrible images. These are horrible things to see. I mean, look at this.
It will never not be true that we all
just overthrew her whole story here. There's just one problem with that. Every photo that she just showed on her show was from the Obama administration, with no mention of that. All of that footage, all of those photos of those kids in cages with those Mylar blankets happened during the Obama administration. One of the photos showed those children wrapped in those metal foil blankets. That photo was provided, that was taken at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection area as these kids were held in cages. It was taken in 2014, while President Obama was in office. There's no mention of it from her show, as far as I could see, any sort of a retraction to say that this was, we were showing these pictures last night on our show. That was during President Obama's time in office. None of that. We'll see tonight if there's any kind of a retraction on that. But I will call out both sides on this type of garbage. I'll call out Fox when they do this. I'll call out MSNBC when they do this, CNN. If I make mistakes here, call me out about it, and I will admit to my mistake. But this kind of thing where you're painting how horrible things were, this happened years before President Trump was in office. using this to paint their narrative over at MSNBC about the Trump administration and this secret separation of families, which is horrible. But it's horrible under either administration. And some of these kids have died in detention. It's horrible under either administration. But get it right, and don't try to pretend it is something that it isn't. Mainstream media, again, feeding us a load of garbage. Well, someone who's not in the mainstream media but might as well be just signed a multi-trillion-dollar contract with Spotify for his podcast. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Joe Rogan podcast. I love the Joe Rogan podcast. This is the fifth thing that I think you need to know about today. I like Joe Rogan a lot. I've interviewed him years ago. He was very kind to me, but I completely disagree with what he said yesterday on his show, and I think it's dangerous. It's dangerous for a number of reasons, not the least of which it's false. It's been totally debunked. And I've actually seen some comments here in my thread about, echoing some of these false statements and spreading this misinformation about what's going on with these wildfires up in Portland, and that they're being set by arsonists and left-wing nut job and arsonists. So I'm going to play what he said, and we'll talk about why this is dangerous and wrong.
Enjoy going there. I actually love Portland. It's one of my favorite places to perform. Most of the people there are very nice, but there's a madness going on there. You want to talk about madness of crowds? That exemplifies that right now. And it's to me, they've arrested people for lighting forest fires up there. They've arrested left-wing people for lighting these forest fires. Air quote activists. And this is something that's also not widely being reported, that people have actually been arrested for lighting fires up there.
Joe, the reason it hasn't been widely reported is because it's not true. In fact, it's been debunked, and it's been debunked by the FBI specifically. So I'll tell you exactly why it's been debunked. According to the Portland FBI office, they specifically shot down this claim, issuing a statement saying that they had investigated such alleged left-wing conspiracy theories, and they are untrue. They are deemed to be untrue. And two men were arrested over the past weekend on charges of arson, but police confirmed that they were neither related to left-wing political activism or that the wildfires had any connection to these particular arsons. I mean, arson happens all the time. I had one of my rental property that I owned set on fire, burned down. A few doors down from me, where we live in Pennsylvania, someone set a house on fire. Poor veteran was building his dream house, like a little log cabin in the woods, and it was almost done. He was about to move into it, and some idiot in the middle of the night set it on fire. Yeah, it happens all the time. Arson happens all the time, sadly. But these two that were arrested had nothing to do with Antifa setting wildfires ablaze. So it's dangerous to, he's got millions of listeners. And so when he goes on the air like that and says that, left-wing activists are setting wildfires and contributing to what's happening out west, and then President Trump picks it up and starts talking about it, this is the kind of dangerous crap that gets spread around on Facebook. And then, your mom sends you a message. Did you see this? Those Antifa kids are setting the wildfires out west. That's awful. And they believe it. So that's why we try to cover the truth here on this show and do what we can. Joe's a good guy. I mean, hopefully he'll maybe correct that on his show today and say I was wrong about that. He is not one to shy away from admitting when he's wrong. So I hope that he'll do the right thing on that. But that is dangerous territory. Those are the 5 things that I think you need to know about today that caught my radar.